Okay, so let's start out, Jake, if you want to just kind of introduce who you are, what you do, how you help entrepreneurs and founders.
Yeah, so my name is Jake Kocher, born and raised in Austin, Texas. Started this business, Aim for Hire, which is a recruiting firm with my brother. We work almost exclusively with seed to Series C funded tech startups, helping them find talent across the org. In addition to that, we also help introduce founders to capital that are raising and typically represent VCs in their portfolio companies when they have hiring needs.
Oh, I love that. Awesome. So yeah, y'all come in from a couple different angles, really helping people get the talent they need to build that business that they're aiming for. I love that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, what we're gonna do is just kind of walk through, because yeah, like as you know, those talent needs, they change as your business goes along. The talent you need at day 0 versus day 100 versus, when you're ready to really scale and launch are going to look really different. So let's kind of walk through these. We're going to frame them around our different stages of growth. So we end that adoption stage with, we've hit that one economic milestone, and then sustainability is like, all right, we want to keep hitting that. And
For
so
sure.
there's how do we continue to keep the deal flow coming in, get the customers coming in? How do we also optimize? And so this is where it's like, it may be, hey, getting to that point, not everything was super efficient, but now we're trying to stretch those margins out a little bit, increase maybe the volume some, but we're not really trying to scale, but we're just trying to say, hey, we have a sustainable rate that we can hold and continue. Because even if you never scale, it's like, hey, we're meeting all of our obligations, plus we're profitable.
Right.
That's a great place to live in, and you can, as a business owner, you can live in that indefinitely if you really want to. But in that stage where you're really trying to optimize, you're trying to get things, build a lean and sustainable business that can keep hitting those milestones over and over and over. How are you thinking about talent differently than kind of what we've been talking about with existential discovery and adoption?
Yeah. I think the way I think about it is like, and I think we're seeing this across big tech right now, in really the last 2 years, is how are we motivating our needle movers to continue moving the needle? And what I mean by that is like, the bigger you get, there become all these layers between who's running the ship and who's operating the ship, right? Like who's driving it and who's like pumping the water out of the bottom, And it's like, it just creates greater and greater separation the bigger you get when you add more layers of management. And so I think one thing from a talent perspective is like, okay, what are we looking for here? Like, are we looking for, I think typically when you get to that stage, you're trying to find more cogs in a wheel, for lack of a better term, but maybe folks that will do what they're told, as opposed to like giant thought leaders that are trying to envision the new path forward of the business. And so now, while that's super important, it's also important to either backfill the needle movers that left to go back to 0 to 1, or to incentivize them to stick around and still have an exciting job. And so I think typically where we get brought in is for the needle movers, right? If you're going to pay a fee, you want it to be for good reason.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of the profile we talk to the most. And I just, it's interesting how separated what the executive, the CEO, is looking for versus what the engineering manager is looking for when you get to a size that's in the hundreds even.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it does seem, I mean, you mentioned this earlier, but there is almost kind of a rehiring of your needle movers, a renegotiating to go, hey, this was really fun up to this point, and you were like flexing all your superpowers. How do your superpowers best play out in this road forward, and letting them maybe pivot within, or if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit. But like ideally helping them if they have all that institutional knowledge, and you want to put that and their skills to best use. So, but it might mean a little shift or a little pivot to keep it interesting, keep them highly leveraged. But then, like you said, you're developing a lot more standard operating procedures, and so you're you're
Right.
hiring people to execute on those, right?
For sure. And yeah, I think the question is like, um, what percentage of our company falls into category A, which is
mm,
like, entrepreneurial spirited, thinks for themselves, versus bucket B, which is like here to get a check and do my job well, but like not really,
mhm.
fanatical about the business, right? And
But
so I think
consistently deliver at an affordable rate in a sense.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Mm,
And I think I don't know how to say this or I don't know how to say this respectfully, but like if one of your needle movers leaves, it's very hard to find another.
mm,
And so I think what happens is typically the needle movers and the non-needle movers, like they're outnumbered, right? Like there's typically
mhm.
more in this bucket than there are in this bucket, but this bucket's like really moving it in the right direction. And
Right.
so I think you lose one of these, like that's a big deal. You lose a couple of these, like we can go find another one or two.
Right. It's a little
Um, and s-
more easier
and
for,
so
yeah.
I think that's one big talent thing is like, well, I gave him a salary bump 24 months ago to the highest salary in the company. It's like, well, have you bumped it since then? It's like, well, no, for XYZ reason. And it just becomes interesting that I think while there needs to be equity, I'm not saying there doesn't need to be equity. There needs to be focus on the people that are most involved or most crucial to the business operation that need to be catered to.
Yeah, so it does seem like actually a big question. Well, I liked, first off, I really like how you're saying, figuring out what type of roles do we need, what type of skills and, um, drive and dynamic do we need in different roles. And so with that in mind, it seems like, would you just say like, have someone almost just sit down with their org chart and kind of like, almost like make a little measurement for you, like, okay, with this role, is this a needle mover, drive, don't need direction, take new ground, or is this a like till taken ground and make sure it produces kind of role? Is that a way, kind of, would that be a helpful exercise for a founder to kind of almost look at their org chart, their current org chart in a sense, and kind of go, okay, if I just did a quick back of the napkin audit, where do I have people in the right kind of seats? What kind of
Right.
what I label these seats,
And I think there are some things you can do mathematically to get answers to that. I think, we're probably talking about like a vast scale of headcount, right? Like once you
Mhm.
get to a certain number like this, I'm not saying this is a possibility, but you go sit on the sales floor for 2 hours, like you're
Mhm.
probably going to find out who your best salespeople are.
Yeah,
You
that's a
go
good
you go sit in an engineering mind share for an hour and a half, you're going to know who's coming up with the good ideas or any ideas, right? And I think that's the interesting thing about leadership that happens as a company gets bigger is that separation. It turns into isolation, right?
question.
And it's like I'm doing this because I'm driving this $100 million ship and I need to have all my focus on this.
Looking to the horizon.
um
Yeah,
exactly it's like
never walking the
maybe
deck.
you
Yeah,
got to check the hull. Like, come on, we got to see if we're taking on water.
yeah.
And so I think that's like it's a small thing, but I really do think it's a super important thing, and it doesn't need to be done, maniacally. But I I just I've seen a lot of enterprises that don't operate that way, and typically get blindsided when they don't.
Yeah. No, that's really good, Jake. I like that. The other thing I heard you say in there that it does really seem like in this sustainability stage, because if you think about it, like from adoption or from existential discovery and adoption, we're really trying to ramp something up, and we hit that milestone. And sustainability is like, okay, let's optimize and get this strong before we move to scalability, where we're ramping up again. And it does sound like what you were naming a few minutes ago. In this stage, it becomes really important to not lose your people that help like activate growth, because you needed them before and you're definitely going to need them again. But here in this middle part, they may kind of feel out of place a little bit.
Right.
And so that seems like that retaining talent is a pretty key element in there that might get missed.
I couldn't agree more, and for the reasons we already discussed, right? Like
Yeah.
it's expensive to hire talent, like not just their base salaries, but the time it takes them to get up to speed, to learn your product, to so on and so forth. And it's very easy to look at the numbers and just say, okay, we're cutting a 90K salary. Let's bring on another 90K salary, and then we're clear sailing. And it's like, I think it's massively underestimated how people become, not always, but often become more productive the longer they stick around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, yeah, you're not resolving the same problems of being a newbie in there.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, no, I like that. Okay, well, let's shift now to that. Like, so we talked about a lot about this sustainability stage, which is a key place, and like we said, it can be a really important place for businesses, even to live indefinitely, depending on your business type. But let's say you get to that, and it's like, all right, we've stabilized, we have really good long-term sustainable growth, and sustainability doesn't mean you have the same and a flat revenue,
For sure.
but it just means at the beginning, it's certainly hockey puck. Or hockey stick like, and then eventually, if you run into a scalability stage, you're ramping that up again. But here, it's just like, hey, we got stable growth over time. We don't have those up and down revenues, that feast and famine that maybe we had before in some of those early stages.